much. My name is Kristen, and I am the archivist at the Centre for Contemporary Arts in Glasgow. And with me today, I have Sorcha Dallas Gray, sorry, right?
Well, Sorcha Dallas, actually. It's too confusing to have surname Gray and Mark's Alasdair Gray, so sorry.
Yes. All right. So we have Reflecting Creative Practice Through Archiving, the story of the Alasdair Gray Archive. And she will be exploring how creative practice can be reflected through archiving by sharing the story of the Alasdair Gray Archive. So, after graduating from the Glasgow School of Art, she co-founded and ran Switch Space, which is a nomadic artist-run space, which developed into opening her own commercial gallery, which she ran from 2003 until 2011. During this time, she represented Scottish polymath Alasdair Gray, and after his passing in 2019, she was tasked with packing up his home and thinking through legacy planning via the creation of the archive. We are here to learn more about today. Please welcome Sorcha Dallas.
Thanks, Kristen, for the introduction, and thank you to CILIPS for inviting me along today. I feel very underqualified to be speaking to a bunch of library and archivist specialists because, disclaimer, I don't come from a collections, archives, libraries background, but I hope maybe the presentation that I do would offer some kind of insights that I've learned over the course of the last 4 years working with the material around the Alasdair Gray Archive. So, these questions have been much on my mind over the last 4 years. As I said, I'm not trained in archives and collections. My background does come from the kind of DIY visual art scene in Glasgow, where really the radical does lie in the self-initiated act and action, and a lot of that built around collectivity and collective working too. This is something that I've always striven for within my own practice as a facilitator and curator, and is really echoed in everything that Alasdair did too. So it's really dependent on kind of working with others and working in collaboration. As Kristen said, I went to Glasgow School of Art. I graduated in '98. After leaving, I set up and co-founded a charitable nomadic artist-run space that moved around the city. And from that, I saw the real gap in support for artists and creatives in the city, set up my own commercial gallery. And it was during that time in 2007 that I started work with Alasdair Gray. At that time, his visual work wasn't so well known. He was more well known as a writer. So really a lot of what I was trying to do was bring his visual work more in line with his literary practice too. So when Alasdair died, I was tasked with legacy planning and thinking through how I could use his approach to making really as a model for what his archive could be too. So I'm just sharing, I guess, some of the reflections really that I found over the last 4 years. So for me, relationships really do matter. Archives are created in many different ways. Not everyone gets to have one, and they exist in many different forms and locations. The language around describing them can often be tricky, and there are real limits in terminology around collections and archival practice. For example, the Alasdair Gray Archive is an archive, but it's also a centre for education. It's a museum, it's a library, it's a commissioning body for new work, and it's a curatorial project too, as well as being a free resource for everyone to be able to access. In my role, I'm an archivist, I'm a curator, I'm a tour guide, I'm a fundraiser, facilitator, director, a planner, and a real lobbyist for everything Alasdair Gray related. A custodian is defined as being a person who has responsibility for taking care of or protecting something. And the reason why I chose this term is because I believe that caring and relationship building is really essential to creating an equitable resource and a horizontal community. This care extends beyond the physical collection to the many people connected to it through their existing and new relationships with it. So relationships really are essential to this approach, with the material, with people's connection to it, and with the city in which it's located as well. So relationships are really fundamental to everything that we do at Haga, enabling it to grow now and for the future. Before I go any further though, to maybe provide a little bit of context to who Alasdair Gray was and why his work matters. He's considered one of Scotland's most important cultural polymaths, with an expansive visual and literary practice that spans over 70 years. He would always describe himself as an artist who fell into writing, and his training at mural making at Glasgow School of Art was really critical in shaping him as a thinker and a maker. He was a proud supporter of socialism, believing in a fair and equitable society, and he really lived his life by these principles, paying his assistants at the same rate of pay as himself, valuing the ability for everyone to have the right to freedom of thought that culture provides. This was most notable in his support of libraries and the belief in the transformative power of literature and the arts. He was a communal maker, supporting overlooked and marginalised voices. As I said earlier, I began working with him in 2007 when I was running my commercial gallery. There'd been very little support given to his visual work, so through the work that I did with him, we created a network of international galleries, of collectors and curators, and enabled his work to be included in key international exhibitions and acquisitions into major UK public collections. I managed large-scale public commissions with him, including the SPT Hillhead mural at the Underground Station. I also worked with him on his 2010 visual biography by Canongate called Life in Pictures. I also worked with Glasgow Museums to devise and curate the Alasdair Gray Season, a citywide series of exhibitions and events, a kind of cornerstone of that being from the personal to the universal, the visual retrospective of his work that happened between 2014 and 2015. So working alongside him, I saw how he lived his life by his principles of openness, of sharing, of equity. He had a genuine interest in others. He was noticing, he was kind, he was curious. Relationships were really central to him as a person and as a practitioner. There wasn't an ego at work. He didn't believe in hierarchies and reinforcing them. He was really respectful of a continuum in which his work was located and making a dialogue with what had come before and what was continuing to come after. But there was also a real irreverence to using some of this material too, annotating, engaging with it creatively and critically, which really planted lots of seeds in my mind. He was in his early 70s. Oh, sorry. He was in his early 70s when we began working together, and a key focus was establishing a foundation upon which to preserve his legacy posthumously, and on which really the Alasdair Gray Archive is now based. So it was really important for me to capture what his intentions were for the work, so to ensure that that was at the centre of any future planning that we were doing. Whilst we were working together, he changed as well, and he named me as a trustee, indicative of his understanding of my long-term involvement in his life and work. After his death in late 2019, I was tasked with legacy planning, which was quite an overwhelming situation. Alasdair always lived and worked within the domestic sphere, and it was absolutely full to the brim with a life lived through making. Items had to be removed at speed from his flat, and funding obviously secured to do that. He lived his life by his socialist values, which meant he was permanently skinned. There was no savings on which to kind of draw from. This was all made a lot more urgent by the fact that there was an imminent COVID pandemic about to hit. So a site was quickly secured at the Whisky Pond, which is a well-visited location for Alasdair near the canal, which was reflected in much of the collection that we have there as well. And I'd also visited that site because the Glasgow School of Art have got their archives there, so I knew it was a safe space to set up an archive and to house a collection. Once restrictions had eased, I started to unpack and organise the material, and really my priority was thinking about how to create a space that was a part recreation of Alasdair Gray's swim room, with all the objects and items that surrounded him, many of which feature in his work. So creating a really welcoming and familiar environment was critical, as was the access to the material too, where objects could be handled, they could be touched, and that could really prompt creative and critical engagement beyond some of the things that we plan and work on too. So by reinstating the collection in this kind of homely context, it creates a space for encounters that can often be really unexpected and emotive, and that's really the power, I think, that objects hold to prompt memories and to unlock stories. And that's the main feedback that we have from all the visitors who come in there, that it's a space for doing that. It's a space that everyone feels welcome, and there's no barriers to them being able to share and to feel that they can access and unlock their stories through the items in our collection. We find that the visitors' responses often really extend beyond their direct connection to Alasdair and the work. We have lots of visitors who don't know anything about Alasdair Gray or his work, but it's still being in that space elicits some kind of positive memory and emotional kind of unlocking. And I'm really interested in this space between objects and memories, and how this is dependent on people's relations to them. And in 2022, it prompted us to create a series of podcasts called Unlikely Objects Mostly, and that was a project that we devised with a couple of students who were on placement with us, one from the MLit Curatorial Practice course at Glasgow, and another SAGSA-funded internship student too. So we were using the various objects in our collection to prompt stories from people connected to Alasdair, and to use it as a vehicle for talking about him as a practitioner and talking more widely about his work and his approach to making. So I guess my deep knowledge of the collection, alongside this kind of curatorial vision and our approach to commissioning and engagement, was really embedded from the inception, and it's been really crucial in improving the value of the collection and why it matters through working with others. As you've heard, my background isn't from a formal archival approach. However, I've been mentored and supported by many people in archiving archives and cataloguing backgrounds and understand archiving and cataloguing standards. However, I feel like this outsider position has sort of allowed me to sort of interrogate existing archival approaches to develop an approach that's really reflective of Alasdair and his own approach to making, without restricting, obviously, its ability to connect to his collections management software, such as Mimsy. So an approach in archives is to often prioritise the original order within a collection. This supports a hierarchical approach, but my thoughts were, how can this be different and reflect Alasdair? He was non-hierarchical as a maker. How can we reflect his collaborative way of working, which was much more horizontal and non-hierarchical? So before items were removed from his home, I ensured that everything was virtually mapped, as well as digitally and recorded. Not all the contents from Alasdair's flat came to us at the Alasdair Gray Archive. Some material went to the NLS, but I decided to keep this original order approach as much as possible when I reinstated the collection at the Whisky Bond. However, over time and through the collection being handled by others, I saw how restrictive this was to parts of the collection and enabling access, really. So after seeking advice, I took the curatorial decision to reorder large sections of the collection to make it more user-friendly. It was really important to keep Alasdair's library intact, and we kept the original order of that, and it's reinstated as it was with his desk and shelving, but everything else has been reworked. Sketches and supporting material have all been reorganised under key themes, titles, completed outcomes, the smaller archival boxes that hold manuscripts, correspondence, ephemera, and photographs contain so much about Alasdair's relationship to others. I was really interested to consider how can an archive move past this sort of singular idea of just one artist, but use Alasdair as a kind of pivot in a map made up of others, because he was so communal as a maker and as a person. This is what his life is like. Surely his legacy through archiving should reflect this too. So with this in mind, I've reordered boxes and dedicated them to others, showing the web of influence and support around Alasdair. So this act of preservation ensures that these largely overlooked and marginalised people's stories aren't forgotten. Their stories really matter to us, and we honour them and remember them at the Alasdair Gray Archive. So forming relationships through and with the collection have been really critical to building support and engagement for it. Connections really do matter. For Alasdair, the learning always was in the making. He was notorious for never hitting deadlines. And the collection we hold is evidence of his drive to always learn through the process of making. So we have drawings, books and manuscripts are annotated to reflect his interest in reinventing both his own work and that of others. So it's really crucial for us at the Alasdair Gray Archive to reflect this approach and to embed it in all that we do. So one way that we do that is by sharing really openly our processes, such as cataloguing and project development, as opposed to presenting them as a kind of completed outcome. Outcomes are good for us to sort of pause and reflect and refine approaches going forward, but the making is really central to everything that we do, and the making being made with others as well. Crucial to building this learning and sharing it more widely has also been to develop digitally. It was really essential at the start as a way of connecting and building a community in the midst of a global pandemic, and it continues to be a crucial part of our programme too. A space to share our learning more widely, to create projects that solely exist digitally, and to foster this community beyond one that's in close physical proximity you can visit. We have plans to extend this next year, and are keen to develop a digital tour that offers the same sort of self-guided elements as long as self-led that our physical tour offers. But also being aware of that being such a rapidly developing area. So not making something that then becomes sort of defunct and not sort of functional in a few years' time. Also, we are a very, very small charity with very limited resources, so it's doing all this with that as a kind of backdrop. But this is two projects that maybe give you a kind of an example into some of the digital outcomes that we've produced over the last few years. The first one is Grey Beyond This Horizon, which is a deep delve which we launched on the 40th anniversary of Lanark. It's a deep delve into Alasdair's most well-known book, Lanark. And then Poor Things, the Novel's Guide. I don't know if any of you are aware that there was a film adaptation this year that did quite well on Alasdair's book called Poor Things. We were really aware that film wasn't going to be set in Glasgow, and we really wanted in our own way to contribute to that discussion, so to root it back into people and places that inspired it. So if you go onto our website, you can link to both these digital projects, and so much of them are around working with others. The Poor Things Novel Guide, we worked with over 30 different contributors, from writers, school children, academics, school teachers. So it's very much about, again, even within the digital realm, reflecting collaboration too. So in order for the potential of a collection to be reinvented and new connections made, a dissemination of knowledge surrounding it, I feel, is really key. So embedding my knowledge within the collection has been really essential, and is an ongoing work that we're working on in order to sort of not gatekeep the knowledge that I have within myself, but to embed it into the collection too. And an initial way of us starting to do that was through the organisational strategy, which I created in 2022. That was a way of embedding Alasdair's approach at organisational level. And a next step in extending this further is within the catalogue listing that we're doing, to really start to fix the knowledge that I have within that listing, and for also it to be able to grow, which would mitigate against any sort of form of gatekeeping going forward. Our organisational strategy led to us then securing charitable status in 2023 and reinventing a more traditional governance structure through creating a non-hierarchical board structure, which is really challenging to set up new ways of working, but really excited so far with the potential and way in which that is developing. At present, we're working also with key stakeholders to try and think about preserving the collection in the longer term, and we're really hopeful for the critical role our collection could play in the reimagination of the city and civic collections. This has all been driven alongside fundraising, an active engagement programme with public-facing events, a dynamic education programme, and a series of new creative commissions. Our creative commissions offer a unique and supportive environment for creatives to explore the cultural potential of their work in response to our collection. So far, we've been delivering these with partners at Creative Writing at Strathclyde University and Gutter Magazine, and we've just secured some support from Creative Scotland to expand this and build some new ambitious partnerships from 2024 into 2025. For these commissions, we invite creative practitioners to respond to some element of Alasdair's work, his practice or approach, and to produce something new that is meaningfully connected, but also exists as a new work in its own right. Throughout his own life, Alasdair sought to celebrate and declare his influences, seeing them as a critical part of all his making. Similarly, we encourage and support creatives to respond to Alasdair's work, taking inspiration from it, but making new work of their own, so it can stand alone and make it a generative resource, reimagining and making new connections with the collection now and for the future. And these are some of the different creatives we've been working with over the last few years. What we hope makes the archive a little bit different is embedding Alasdair's ethical framework within the organisation, and that has led us to kind of devise this creative ecosystem model, which reflects his own approach to making as being a socially focused action. This means making sure all our work synchronises across our three main priorities, which is creative commissioning, public engagement and education. This innovative model sees not one area prioritised over another, but strengthened through their relationship to each other. Archives are traditionally spaces maybe where material conservation is prioritised over public access. Absorption of material over right to access could be argued as being an inherited attitude based on hierarchies and colonial power. Unconventionally, we opened to the public while still in flux. We didn't have a full catalogue, and we prioritised engagement with it from inception and upholding Gray's own belief in the right to access culture for all. This was a considered approach in resistance to any form of gatekeeping, and proving the value of our collection to others through their engagement with it. In Randall Jimerson's Archives Power, Memory, Accountability and Social Justice, he argues that archivists must abandon the rhetoric of neutrality and embrace archives to promote social responsibility, accountability and community empowerment. He also highlights the critical role the archivist or custodian has, and how their personal choices define whether an archive is a passive tool of oppression or an active form of liberation. Alasdair lived his whole life and made work in a socially conscious way. I felt really strongly that there was an opportunity to rethink what his archive could be and should be through reflecting his own values of openness, equity and sharing within it. So the learning continues to be in the making for all that we do, However, this hasn't obviously come with huge challenges and risks. We've learned much in the last 4 years. Alasdair's entire life was lived precariously, and risk has been something we have tried to work to mitigate since inception. However, this has at times presented new possibilities as well. The main challenges has obviously been around the risk to the collection, funding and capacity, so lobbying for support, both financial and otherwise, was really crucial from the start, improving the value of what the collection can help us learn about ourselves and each other. So much of Alasdair's work was concerned with fixing disappearing histories, making the case for his archive to exist and to be supported has been much the same really, and it remains ongoing. The risk around the stability of the collection is ongoing, and we're working with key stakeholders to try and stabilise this. However, this risk did create a possibility in us starting to develop our own collection. So growing our own collection beyond Alasdair's own material that came from his home reflects the collaborative way in which he works. So it's allowed us to start to now, on a larger area, share the stories of others connected to him, and to really make the archive a reflection of who he was as a person and practitioner. So a person who exists within this network of other creatives working. And this has been reflected in the deposit scheme that we've set up, where people can donate Alasdair Gray related material into the archive, but also now starting to dedicate part of the archive to others, so to have a catalyst of archives around Alasdair's too. And our first foray into that is now working with the family of Agnes Owens, a much overlooked and marginalised writer, and showing the real nurturing and supportive personal and professional friendship they shared, and we really hope to try and extend that with others going forward. Funding has been an ongoing struggle. There's been huge investment from me personally and professionally to fix the collection. Archives often rely on the goodwill and support of others to ensure their stability, and stepping in to secure them against direct threats of being sold, destroyed or relocated beyond the source of their cultural value. I would really like to see this change, and for a legal protective layer to be introduced for legacy planning around individuals of notable interests, because so much of Alasdair, of the archive's growth, has been really reliant on goodwill and the support of others, and I'm really grateful for the many people within the Archives and Collection Network who have generously shared their experiences with us. Recently I've been meeting with other archivists the idea of an artist archives network to sort of share our learning, to offer support and advise others. This seems like a growing area of interest and concern, and to formalise it into a collegiate network that can become also a voice to lobby at a higher level for agency and investment, I think is really important. Because as Alasdair said, people who care nothing for their country's stories and songs are like people without a past, without a memory. They are half people, and I believe that investing in these cultural stories is really key. So building a legacy in real time has given me insight into what cultural stories, I guess, are being supported and told, and how culture is political. A key way to ensuring the stories that we hold are shared more widely is through education. We currently host 2 SAGSA-funded collaborative doctoral award students, a SAGSA internship, and a host of undergrad and postgrad students from subjects including art writing, sculpture and environmental art, curatorial practice, technical art history, creative writing, English and Scottish literature. However, we believe that engagement must be developed from the earliest stage onwards, and so we continue to create and work with teachers to develop resources at primary and secondary school level. These resources have been developed through a co-authorship approach, collaborating directly with the teachers to help construct them. And in 2023, we created a portable education resource called the Travelling Archive. So this is a small portable resource which has facsimile versions of key parts of our collection that we can take into communities and schools, and they can also borrow themselves to prompt engagement and learning around it. So, in conclusion, we really remain hopeful about the Alasdair Gray's archive potential to grow locally, nationally and internationally in ways that benefit the public, celebrate community and unlock our collective imagination. The last 4 years have been spent securing support to establish it as a physical and digital entity, and this work has been delivered with high levels of ambition despite the ever-changing challenges that the global pandemic caused. Now, amongst other things, the current financial crisis is impacting culture in profound and ongoing ways, and we believe that culture is not for the privileged, but it's the right for all to experience and contribute to, and it's what makes us human. It builds empathy and collectivism. This hopefulness to do better and be better through culture and working together is really at the heart of everything that Alasdair produced, and at the heart of everything that we strive to do in his name. would you now just try and click on our YouTube link to a little film that we made, if you're okay to watch it. It's an art history film that we made last year, which shows you a little bit more about what I've been talking about.
Art history. The Alasdair Gray Archive was established in 2020 after Alasdair Gray's death in late 2019. Alasdair always worked within the domestic sphere. His flat was full to the brim of books, artworks, objects, studio ephemera and furniture that had been found or gifted to him. After Alasdair died...
Sorry, it looks like it's playing on the laptop, but it's not connecting to the screen. Just bear with us for a moment. Thank you.
Sorcha secured funding from the Scottish Government and Creative Scotland. The Alasdair Gray Archive was established in 2020 after Alasdair Gray's death in late 2019. Alasdair always worked within the domestic sphere. His flat was full to the brim of books, artworks, objects, studio ephemera and furniture that had been found or gifted to him. After Alasdair died, Sorcha Dallas, his friend and former gallerist, was responsible for packing up his flat. There was a strict 3-month deadline for clearing the property, so our focus was on working quickly to secure Gray's legacy. Many individuals and organisations supported this process. Sorcha secured funding from the Scottish Government and Creative Scotland to assist with the costs. Completed at speed, and just 1 week before the first COVID-19 lockdown began, these items from Alasdair's home made their way to a new location, the Whisky Bond in Glasgow, close to the Forth and Clyde Canal, where the archive is now based. The Whisky Bond is a creative industry hub, with shared making spaces, artist studios and workshops. It was a well-visited location for Alasdair, and the archive contains many sketches and pieces of writing which use the landscape around the Whisky Bond and the canal as a source of inspiration. The Alasdair Gray Archive became a registered charity in 2023. It holds both Gray's family collection as well as recent acquisitions and donations acquired by the archive. This entire collection consists of original visual artworks, sketches and drawings, Gray's original prints made with Glasgow Print Studio and Edinburgh printmakers, a restaging of his working studio setup, a section of his personal library, all Gray publications, including those he designed for others, as well as a section of literary papers, photographs and correspondence, all held there for research and learning purposes. This extensive collection allows the archive to present Gray's work in a number of different contexts, through projects and events, educational activities, as well as acting as a catalyst for new commissions. We commission new work by asking creative practitioners to respond to elements of Gray's practice and approach, to produce something new that is meaningfully connected, but also exists in its own right. Through his art, Gray sought to celebrate and declare his influences, seeing them as an integral part of all making. We too encourage and support creatives to respond to Gray's work, taking inspiration from it, but making new work of their own that can stand alone and make it a generative resource. We develop partnerships and seek new ways to engage audiences in exhibitions, one-off events, talks and tours. We are also the key centre for research called Gray Studies, allowing a unique, unparalleled opportunity for students, academics and the wider public to glean a fuller understanding of the expansive nature of Gray's practice and the invaluable contribution he made to 20th century culture. The Archive's aims are very much in the spirit of all things Gray, to create democratic, questioning and equitable opportunities and foster the idea of openness, equity and sharing. Alasdair was a communal maker, supporting overlooked and marginalised voices. We reflect the collaborative way in which he worked by sharing the stories of others and making the archive a reflection of who he was as a person and practitioner. This approach is mirrored in our deposit scheme, where sections of the archive are dedicated to others. A focus for this is creating an Agnes Owens archive with support from her family to share the story of the nurturing friendship they shared. The archive is free and open to all. Please get in touch through our website, email or social media to book your visit today. We look forward to welcoming you.
Still on most of the
Thank you.
All right, we have time for maybe a couple of questions. Does anyone have one?
Fine.
Yeah, go ahead.
It don't go like that with tobacco. Is there any other archives you took inspiration from this time? About this year.
Sorry, that's not loud as I imagined. Yeah, no, I don't come from an archives background. I had a little bit of experience of archiving when I ran my own gallery. I was building up visual archives. I was building up archives for those contemporary artists I was working with. I guess the challenge that Alasdair's work posed is the multifaceted nature of it. So, and when I did start working with him, obviously the system, which was artwork, sculptural works, works within a more strict parameters, I was able to record and list his work because it was so expansive across the visual and the literary and kind of everything in between, kind of presented its own kind of challenges and made me rethink how things could maybe work. But my experience up to that point was maybe around archives of artists' work connected to galleries. So I'm thinking about like the Martin Kippenberger estate and the work that they were doing around that, like the John Giorno Foundation I found really inspirational, because a lot of what they were doing is, I guess, using his work as a poet and performance artist as a catalyst for kind of new commissions and more innovative ways of working, really, which I guess is centred on my experience and my interest in engagement, which, after I left, I stopped working in commercial gallery, I went into working in grassroots community organisations within teaching too. And I think I often saw the disconnect between working in, and I admit the world that I was working in the visual art scene is quite a gate-kept community, and the little impact maybe it has or interest engaging communities directly and those people who are experiencing some of the art on the directly. So. But then through working with Alasdair and thinking more through legacy planning, there was a lot of different people I spoke to informally who shared their knowledge, from the Wilhelmina Barnes Graham Trust to Anthony Burgess Foundation, to a range of different, because Alasdair fits between this sort of visual and literary maker, I tried to speak to as many people as I could who were working within the archive sector with either artist estates or literary estates. And I guess from my conclusion from all of that was that there's common issues, but all of them are quite bespoke, dependent on often, the will, who's left to care for that material and why, and the structures around the legacy planning. Is there a formal approach? Is there a charitable organisation around protecting that material? Is it an individual? All of those kinds of things. So I guess I started to cherry pick a little bit around what could work for Alasdair, and then when we started to catalogue and list it, Glasgow City Archives came in to help train us on kind of how to list the transcript material. We also had different people from the Mitchell, from Glasgow Museums more recently, who've been helping us with the visual, with the library side of it too. But I guess what's slightly different about it is the fact that because the main space is installed like a front room, we're trying to almost think of that as an artwork with the different levels and relationships within it. So from like the ephemera to the preparatory works for completed artworks to some of the transcripts and manuscripts to the library. So thinking of it as a whole, and then how do we use that to start to build relationships between it. That's a roughly, sorry, long answer. I hope that answered your question. Yeah.
I think shaking. Let's go ahead. And as far as the thing that we've worked with the deposits in your saying that it's deposit art materials that related to days of what's kind of what's the appraisal or selections or release dates?
Yeah, we've got a kind of, we've developed parameters around. Sorry, I can't actually see you, even though I'm answering your question. We've got parameters around what we accept and what we don't. It's quite open at the moment. I can imagine going forward that could potentially have to become a bit more restricted. For those of you who don't know, Alasdair made just so much stuff. That was part of the challenge when I started to work with him within a gallery, is that I think I realised quite early on that I would never know everything. There's so much of it that exists in the public realm or has been gifted and given to others. So I think it will be a collection that we'll never know the end of. It's constantly growing. That's very exciting to be part of too. But as a result, there's multiples of a lot of the same things. And at the moment for us, it's really important that those people who want to deposit can, and often an object, whether that's an artwork or a postcard, is a way of them also unlocking and depositing a memory and a story. And those things are really, really important to us to still feel like, to build that community that was so kind of central to Alasdair as a maker, and to honour that and to see the value and to notice those people and recognise their connections and their stories to help us extend our knowledge to around it as well. I mean, most weeks there's something that comes in that I've never seen before, so that there's a huge amount of learning that happens through people doing that as well. One of our kind of highlights quite recently was one of Alasdair's secretaries in the 70s who he couldn't afford to pay, so he paid her in an artwork. I'd never seen the original of it. We had a very bad medium format image of it, deposited the original into us too. So I guess there's a part, there's a kind of rescuing in a way of some of these objects too, which could either have the potential to go onto the secondary market or potentially be destroyed as well. So there's a bit of preservation that exists around trying to grow our collection too.
All right, it looks like we are out of time, but our next keynote will be in here. You have about 5 or so minutes if you need to come for a break. But let's thank Sorcha again. Thank you.